on the shoulders of all the people who were slaves, period.
Anyway, so like some people got masked today.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So I am going to chat a little bit, me and Brandon here. Wow, this is so exciting, so wonderful. I mean, whoever thought that we would see this happen in Benicia? Am I right? Am I right? Am I right? You know, this is always something that's happened in Vallejo, but you know what? The little sister's coming up. The little sister's coming right up, right? Right? Before we start, though, I would like to do something that is traditional in the African Yoruba religion, which is to pour libation to our ancestors. In particular, our ancestors who not only made that passage from Africa to the states, the countries over here, but also to every one of our ancestors who suffered and toiled through slavery to build the United States, and to the slaves who had to wait to know that they were free until the masters thought, well, you know, let's get some things done, some work done or whatever, and delayed their freedom. So if I could pour libation to our ancestors whose shoulders we stand on, and also if we could have a moment of silence for them, please. Brandon and I are co-founders of the Benicia Black Lives Matter. And what's interesting about the origins of Benicia Black Lives Matter is that it came from two different avenues, two different roads. I was traveling on one road, Brandon was traveling on another road, and eventually, you know, those roads intersected. So I will tell you about my road, Brandon will tell you about his road, and then I will introduce our Negro National Anthem. So my road, the road that I took to the goal and objective, was when I moved to Benicia about 19 years ago, and my son was in middle school, and we basically moved to Benicia because it was in the schools were good, but we were losing our house in Vallejo. So we luckily were able to buy a house in Benicia. And when my son went to junior high, he started having some problems with a group of kids who kept teasing him and calling him the N-word. And I said, you know, tell him to stop, tell him that that's not right, talk to a teacher, talk to the coach, talk to the principal, and none of that worked. But finally, because it just, oh, that's just kids. Well, finally, I did something I didn't want to do. I said, you tell them next time they call you the N-word, you're going to smack them. You're going to punch them. and they did it anyway, and he punched him. Well, I got a call from the middle school saying my son was suspended for violence. And I said, okay, well, tell me the situation. Well, somebody called him a name, and we have a zero tolerance for violence. Well, what name did they call him? Well, that's not, no, that's important. So, make a long story short, I went up to the school, and I said, okay, so I have to let you know that when these children call any black child the N-word, that is a punch, that is verbal violence. So, if you're going to suspend my son, you're going to suspend these children too. And if you don't, we'll be going further. And I want to know why the teachers and the other people who were supposed to take care of this didn't do it. Make a long story short, my son did not get suspended. I unfortunately asked to speak to the parents of these children to figure out how they even thought it was okay to call black children the N-word, and that connection didn't happen. And so that is one incident. Same thing happened in the high school. In addition to trivial things, microaggressions. I'm walking down First Street, and two white women come up to me and say, "Why are you here?" And I'm like, "What do you mean, why am I here? Shouldn't you be in Oakland or Richmond or Vallejo?" And I'm like, "Really? Why should I be there?" And that, in addition to, going to Safeway and some white man calling me, "Hey, gal, can you give me a cart?" Gal? I'm older. What? Let's see. There's many more. Oh, in addition to my son, my nephew, getting stopped by the police, and he's like, "Why am I being stopped?" And they're like, "Where do you live?" Showed him he lived in Benicia, and he was like, "Where do you really live?" Okay. And that's when that was when I said, "You know what? This is enough. I can't deal with this. I need to go to the city council and make a complaint," which I did. I'm sure it's in the archive somewhere. And when I made this complaint, I guess it's public forum, so there was no response other than we trust and believe in our police. And I said, okay. And right about this time, this is when the situation with George Floyd happened. And I'm like, okay, so that's all we're going to get here is we do trust and believe. Okay, so make a long story short, had to call a march, had to do a protest. And of course, even as I was setting up the protest, I had white people coming up to me saying, "Why are you causing dissension in Benicia? There's no racism in Benicia," blah, blah, blah. So that's pretty much how, on my end, how Benicia Black Lives Matter started. It went forward to doing a resolution toward for the city council, and I will leave it there. And I want to thank the city council. I want to thank everybody I want to thank everybody on the city council who voted for our resolution, who saw that this was needed, who saw it was necessary. Please give them a hand, because you know what? Part of making Juneteenth a festival, a holiday, was on the resolution. So I thank the city council so much who voted for the resolution. Go ahead, Brenda.
Good morning, though I guess it's probably closer to afternoon now. I'll try to be brief and just say my kids will be here shortly. I moved to Benicia when my son was 1 week old from Emeryville, as many people probably do. One of the reasons I came to Benicia was because of the schools. But as we're house hunting, one of the things that I wrote about for Huffington Post was what it was like to house hunt as a person of color. I had a whole lot of anxiety about coming to this particular little town. Originally, I'm from Las Vegas, specifically from West Las Vegas, which is the only place that black folks could live when my grandparents left the South. That sort of history carries with me everywhere I go, because there's a history of organizing and protest. And so I, by trade, am a civil rights attorney and an organizer. I had wrote this piece. I had wrote this piece about what it was like to house hunt as a person of color, because as I said, I had a lot of anxiety about moving here. I remember, I think the first couple of days in the house, one of my neighbors left a pie or something next to the door. I'm from the inner city, so I wasn't really accustomed to that. I was like, there's no way I'm going to eat that. This is strange. But I say all that to say that I very early on, even before I got here, decided that for my children to feel safe here, that I was going to have to be involved. So eventually I got on the Open Government Commission. I believe I was interviewed by then Council Member Young and put on that by the former mayor. And I ended up getting off of that because I felt like it wasn't enough happening through that particular commission. My son and daughter had been to protest every year of their life, actually leading up to their birth. I wrote another piece about how just weeks before they were born, there was another black man killed in the streets. And that was going to sort of be part of their lineage, that they're going to carry them everywhere that they go. So when George Floyd's murder happened, my children had already been to protest again every year of their lives. And I saw that there was this discussion about, eight can't wait, which essentially was this: if a police department adopts these 8 principles, then in theory, that police department will become less violent towards black folks and other disenfranchised people. But in truth, many of those principles had already been adopted by departments like the LAPD and others. And so I wrote City Council, the mayor, and the chief of police talking about why 8 can't wait would be insufficient. That led to a couple meetings with the chief of police, and former mayor Elizabeth Patterson asked me sort of what things that I think should be put in place, because this is work that I do every day. I started trying to put together these different component parts that would turn into the resolution. And in those conversations, I ended up being connected with Namat, and we had some conversations. There was already some things brewing, and so sort of here we are now. But I say that to say that it took a whole lot of different things to happen. It took a certain composition of the city council to get the resolution passed, which maybe it would have been passed today, maybe it wouldn't. But nonetheless, it was passed, and now we have to be holding folks accountable. So part of that accountability was asking the current city council, which voted unanimously to raise the freedom flag for the first time, which we did yesterday. To ask for some support for this. And I do want to take a moment to just say that everybody in Benicia Black Lives Matter is a volunteer. These are people that have jobs, families, etc. And they went to great effort to put all this together, to contact the vendors, etc. And so everybody can just give a hand for those folks. And just the last thing that I want to do, which I said yesterday at the flag raising, but I think it's important. I think it's important that we center this particular event in the social and political context. So right now, you have a tremendous amount of energy being directed towards opposition to critical race theory, which anybody who's been to graduate school knows that critical race theory is not being taught in elementary school or middle school, etc. It was actually a class that I had to volunteer to take in law school, right? But that grappling is coming after the longest sustained protest in American history, which came as a result of George Floyd's murder, right? There's been all this discourse about how we've moved forward. But if you actually look at the polling data, right after George Floyd's murder, Black Lives Matter was higher in the polls than it ever been. If you look now, it's actually lower in the polls than it was preceding George Floyd's murder. And what that means is that we need to continue to organize. We need to continue to hold folks accountable. Benicia Black Lives Matter is engaged in conversations with the school district and other places to ensure that American history is actually being taught. Mayor Young mentioned that he didn't learn about Juneteenth as a youth. Those things are not accidental. the way in which Black folks and other disenfranchised peoples have been erased from history is not accidental. So I want to center this particular moment, this particular celebration, this once in a lifetime, there'll never be another first Juneteenth in Benicia, the third capital of California. So we need to take this energy, this joyous energy, and continue to move forward towards holding the city and the county accountable to disenfranchised peoples. Thank you.
The next thing that we're going to do, which is fantastic, is we are going to hear this amazing band play two versions of the Negro National Anthem. And anyone who has a program, the words are in it. And if you don't have a program and you don't know the words, just stand up and feel the energy of that music.
Every voice and sing till the
At this time, I'm going to bring up Mr. Robert Johnson to give some comments on the history of Juneteenth. Everybody, please give a round of applause.
Thank you. And I want to thank everybody for being here again. And thank the Lord for giving us the time to reflect on what has actually happened. Going back in the history, in 1863, Abraham Lincoln issued the Proclamation, the Emancipation Proclamation. And about 11 months later, Congress ratified that. At that point, all slaves in the United States were declared free. 2 years later, that news got to Texas, delivered by a General Granger, and about 2,000 men who were needed to keep order. And General Granger issued a declaration called General Process 3, which declared all the slaves in Texas free. And from that time on, all the slaves in Texas were declared to be free under certain conditions. I would encourage everyone to Google that resolution and read it, because part of that resolution also told the slaves to stay where you are. Your relationship now is no longer slave and master. You are now an employee of the same master that you had, but you are not to leave. You're not to move. You're not to congregate around the military bases. So even in that proclamation, there was restriction. What was the environment outside of the Black community? From 1866 on, the Black community in Texas celebrated that day. And it said that the week prior to the announcement, the dock workers in Galveston, where most of the cotton trade traveled, would periodically sing, "Freedom is Coming." they would believe in. And I can only imagine what that felt like. And I certainly can't imagine that now. To know that you could wake up the next day and you didn't have to worry about having one of your children sold off, or possibly having your daughter or your wife summoned to the big house to meet the master's wishes. I can't imagine what it felt like, and I doubt that you can either. But it should be clear that freedom was a big thing, emancipation was a big thing, but it was only the start. Because in addition to ending slavery, Jim Crow started with it. As we look at down through time, there were 13th, 14th, 15th Amendments passed to try to actually give slaves true citizenship. Slaves were voting, slaves were prospering despite the disadvantages they had, because there was no 40 acres, there was no mule. And despite all of that, in the first 10 years, during Reconstruction, black communities prospered in this country. That's a history that we don't hear. As most of you, and I'm one of those, didn't have any history about what slavery really was, and certainly not about Juneteenth in high school. If anyone has had that kind of history lesson in high school, I'd like them to raise their hands. I see a few young people, and I see one person there. But it's American history that we are not taught. Moving forward from where we are, and standing here today on Juneteenth, we are in a position now to honor our ancestors, to honor what was done, but to also recognize that what was done was on only a small portion of what needs to be done. We are in an era now where, as my brother Brandon was saying, critical race theory is being challenged. The 1619 Project is being challenged. There has been a 1776 history lesson that's been put out as a truth which totally whitewashes history. There's also, Texas also signed into law another one for 1836, which commemorates the Texas freedom from Mexico, and does not mention that Texas, in their constitution, made it impossible for a slave or a person of color to immigrate to their state and be free. They specifically made that so. Moving to today, we have so many impediments now and so many entities that are fighting what we should have. As American citizens, all of us should be able to vote, express our opinions, and we can have different opinions, but we should be able to express those. But we have, I think it's 28 states now that have already passed laws against voting, and over 400 initiatives to try to stop voting, most of which is directed at people of color. This is an ongoing fight that has recurred in our history. After the 10 years of Reconstruction, all of Reconstruction's efforts, or most of them, were dismantled. Under Andrew Johnson, there were former slave owners, and many people don't know this, who were actually paid reparations for the loss of their slaves. And now if we say reparations, everybody is saying, no, 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 it's too much. Or no, they don't deserve that. What more do they want? But the reality is, this country exists. America exists because of the wealth that the 13 colonies were able to generate with the free labor of slaves and the ingenuity of slaves. They weren't just laborers. They did a lot. And the reality is, we as a country have to acknowledge that we need to be in the same place for all our citizens. In just closing, would ask you to look at some of the common factors that you see now. You see groups that are organizing. In fact, there was just an incident in Dallas where a school district decided to teach history properly based on the behavior of some of their students from the prior year. And the local community, the parents, overturned that school board and refused to let them do it. We have had blatant examples of people willing to obfuscate history to make it more comfortable for them. And it's not about being uncomfortable. I don't want you to be uncomfortable. And quite frankly, I don't want to be uncomfortable either. But the reality is, slavery happened. And slavery is part of what built this country. And the reality is that we need to look at all of our history honestly so we can prosper and grow as a country. So here's the challenge to each of you. Take a little time. You can start with Google or go looking for books. There's some wonderful books just on this very subject, Juneteenth. Among other things, there is so much information out there now, and it's a matter of whether you desire to consume it or not. And enhance your knowledge of it so that whatever your position, you can defend that position with true history. Because I'm not talking about black history. I'm talking about American history. We're all there. And again, I'm not going to belabor or go on and on. My wife is not here to snatch me by the collar and pull me down. But I would urge all of you to take the time and learn, and look it up, and give things some thought. You see a lot on TV, you see a lot through electronic media. Question it, vet it, make sure that it is viable, not just something that somebody you like said, but something that you can find some proof and validity for. And I think my ancestors, which my mother was from Texas, I'm fairly sure that my grandfather was born a slave. My ancestors would ask that we take the time and the effort and the energy to honor them by growing and learning for ourselves. And knowing that that is what is the only thing that's going to move this country and us as a people forward to a better, and to reach the promise that was laid out in the Declaration, was reinforced in the Emancipation, but has never been reached in reality.
Can we have another round of applause for our elder, Mr. Robert? Because, you see, this is so traditional. in the African culture to have our elders embody the stories of our lives and of everything that happens. It's historical. The true wisdom and the true knowledge was passed down through the word, through spoken voice, and eventually, of course, got into writing. But this is why we have our elders, lest we forget.
My name is Addison Kelly, one of our mentors of our Omega Gent program. Like my sister asked, she asked us to give a history on the Omega Gents. The Omega Gents is simply a mentorship program that our fraternity, the Omega Sci-Fi Fraternity Incorporated, operates. Our Gents is going to explain the program to you through their step process. So I'm gonna let them say what they got to say, and then I'll come back if there's any questions.
My name is Emmanuel Richardson, and today we will be celebrating Juneteenth, which is now a federal holiday. And to understand Juneteenth, you have to understand slavery. And to understand slavery, you have to understand the Middle Passage.
Somebody tell me why were we treated so bad? Oh, I wanna know, I need to know, and I gotta know, why were we treated so bad? Somebody tell me why were we treated so bad? Oh, I wanna know, I need to know, and I gotta know, why were we treated so bad? Captured by my own brother, placed in these wrinkly old chains, placed on a strange vessel with all these aches and pains. Somebody tell me why were we treated so bad? Oh, I wanna know, I need to know, and I gotta know, why were we treated so bad? Traveled down the Middle Passage, across the 7 seas, placed on an auction block, strange faces staring at me. Somebody tell me why were we treated so bad? Oh, I wanna know, I need to know, and I gotta know, why were we treated so bad? I get down on my knees, down on my knees to pray. Oh, I heard a voice, I heard a voice, I heard a voice, I heard a voice say, don't you give up, my young soldier, and put your faith in me. 'Cause that's what makes a man, what makes a man, what makes a man of the OGP.
go. Introducing, yeah. The brothers of the OG. Boom. 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 Well, it's the OGs. Oh yeah. I said the OGs. Oh yeah. We're gonna kick this step for you. Well, it's OGs. Oh yeah. I said the OGs. Oh yeah. We're gonna chill until they finish their step. Well, it's the OGs. Oh yeah. I said the OGs. Oh yeah. We're gonna finish their step for you. All right. It goes in OG. 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 Well, hit me now. A boom boom. Hot dang. Who dares to go down? A boom boom. Hot dang. The G's are in town. It goes OG. 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 Hold on. What? Wait. What are you looking at?
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
I want to say thank all you guys for coming out and watching us step and coming to the Juneteenth. A little bit about our program is that we're the Omega Gents. We're the mentees of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated. Our symbol is a fist. It represents justice and equality, and we keep it on a broken arm because we feel like we haven't made that yet. You may wonder why, and Amari on our side is going to tell us.
JT! OGB, go! People moving out, people moving in. Why? Cause the color of their skin. Run, but your show can't hide. And 9 for an eye, a 2 for a 2. Vote for me and I'll make America great again. Rap on a Redman. Rap. Well, the only person talking about blood died, brother, is the preacher. And it seems nobody's interested in learning but the teacher. Segregation, determination, demonstration, integration, aggravation, humiliation, obligation to our nation. It's a ball of confusion. That's what the word is today. Yeah.
At this moment, I would like to bring up our mayor, Steve Young, who will read out the proclamation.
Thank you, Brandon. It's not right that you make me follow the Omega Gents. Brandon had mentioned earlier that yesterday I talked about how my education was sorely lacking. And I always thought that I was relatively well educated. Went to Cal Berkeley in the late 60s, early 70s. I went to graduate school in San Francisco. And now I find that my education is sorely lacking when it comes to some of these issues. And it's no accident that we learned about Helen Keller, but we never learned about W.E.B. Du Bois. It's no accident that we learned about the Watts riots, but we never learned about the Tulsa Race Massacre. It's no accident that we learned about George Washington's wooden teeth, but we never learned that those teeth were actually from slaves. It's no accident that we learned about black ghettos, but we never learned about Black Wall Street. It's no accident that we learned about the New Deal, but we never really learned about redlining. It's no accident that we learned about Tommy Smith and John Carlos raising their fists at the Mexico City Olympics in 1968, but we didn't learn that they were sent home the next day and stripped of their medals. It's not an act, this is, it's white privilege to have history rewritten in a way that doesn't make us feel bad, that doesn't inconvenience us. It's what they call the inconvenient truth. And now, as Brandon also mentioned, that we have this movement to ban critical race theory, and the idea that we're going to ban the teaching of systemic racism is an example of systemic racism. So I guess my message before I read the proclamation is that be the change you want to see. Get involved. Register to vote. Apply for a city board or commission. Run for office. We need to make changes that can only happen with your participation. And so with that, I first want to, I'll read the proclamation that the City Council passed. I want to acknowledge our City Council members who all voted in favor of this proclamation. Lionel Vargas Watt, Christina Strawbridge, Trevor Basansky, and Vice Mayor Tom Campbell is somewhere. Let's see him. Oh, sorry. He's hiding behind his washer grains. So with no further ado, let me read the proclamation in recognition of Juneteenth Freedom Day, June 19th, 2021. Whereas Juneteenth is the oldest known celebration commemorating the abolition of slavery in the United States and the emancipation of African American slaves throughout the Confederate South, Union soldiers landed at Galveston, Texas on June 19, 1865, with the news that the Civil War had ended and the enslaved were now free, more than 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation was issued on January 1st, 1863. Until that day, slavery had been relatively unaffected in Texas by the Emancipation Proclamation, and Texas was viewed as a safe haven for slave owners to relocate with their slaves because the state experienced no large-scale fighting or significant presence of Union troops. And whereas on the first Juneteenth, a number that combines June and 19th, the people of Texas were read General Order Number 3, which stated, quote, "The people of Texas are informed that in accordance with a proclamation from the Executive of the United States, all slaves are free. This involves an absolute equality of rights and the rights of property between masters and slaves, and the connection heretofore existing between them becomes that between employer and free laborer." The Juneteenth announcement was met with jubilation that spread throughout the country as African Americans relocated to neighboring states and became reacquainted with family. And whereas the first Juneteenth celebration was a time for reassurance, prayer, and the gathering of family members, Juneteenth continued to be widely observed in Texas decades later, with many former slaves and descendants making an annual pilgrimage to Galveston, Texas. Today, Juneteenth continues to grow within communities and organizations throughout the country. Numerous national and local Juneteenth organizations have organized with the common mission of promoting and cultivating knowledge and appreciation of African American history and culture, while encouraging continuous self-development and respect for all people and cultures. And whereas California Assembly Bill number 1749, approved and filed with the Secretary of State on July 12, 2002, required the governor of the state of California to proclaim the third Saturday in June each year as Juneteenth National Freedom Day, a day of observance, and would urge the people of California to join in celebrating this day to honor and reflect on the significant role that African Americans have played in the history of the United States and how they have enriched society through their steadfast commitment to promoting brotherhood and equality. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Steve Young, Mayor of the City of Benicia, on behalf of the City Council of the City of Benicia, hereby proclaim June 19th, 2021 as Juneteenth Freedom Day in the City of Benicia, and encourage residents, schools, businesses, and community groups to celebrate Juneteenth as a day of remembrance and celebration. Thank you very much.
is history in the making. I love it. I love this. I love this whole situation. I love this whole day. And thank you, Mayor and the council, for giving us this day. I want to make one little small correction. Not every council person did vote for the resolution, but I am praying and hoping that eventually, as we move forward and we progress, that every council member will see how positive and beneficial BBLM and the history, the true history is for Benicia and for the rest of the region. Thank you, thank you. I want to, before I announce this beautiful, amazing woman that's next, we have a few more esteemed guests. We have our wonderful school board members who we cherish. There's Sherry Zeta, who's here. There she is. Yay. Hello. And Dr. Gethsemane Moss, right over here. And always a delight to have Mel Orpelia here, who's the district representative for Mike Thompson. Yay! Right on, right on. Now, without any further ado, one of the items in the resolution that we wrote that the city council graciously passed was that the city hire an equity manager so that people such as myself and other people of color who experience racist situations in Benicia have someone to go to, and there's someone in the city of Benicia who will work on strengthening equity and social justice in the most correct, most perfect way in Benicia, and that was done fantastically. So I also want to thank our past city manager Lori and our present city manager Eric Upson. So without any further ado, I am going to announce this fantastic, dynamic woman, Dr. Malika Chambers, to read the resolution.
Before I start, I just want to say that I am just a vessel. The work that created the position that allowed me to be here was all of the people that you've heard from today, all of the citizens of Benicia, and I think I'm living proof that if you believe in change, if you work to create change, change will happen. So here I am. So the resolution number is 2103, and that's significant because it was passed in the year 2020, and it is the 103rd resolution that was passed in the city of Benicia that time. And here we go. A resolution of the City Council of the City of Benicia recognizing Benicia Black Lives Matter and consideration of actions to address unconscious bias. Whereas the death of George Floyd at the hands of the Minneapolis Police Department on May 25th, 2020 prompted protests across the United States, and whereas Benicia residents held protests here to share their experiences and voice their concerns, and whereas a group of Benicia residents have formed a community organization called Benicia Black Lives Matter and made requests for changes to address unconscious bias in the city operations, including the Benicia Police Department, and whereas many of its requests for change in the Benicia Police Department have been made or are underway, and whereas the city of Benicia acknowledges that more anti-bias training, education, communication is needed, now, therefore be it resolved that the City Council of the City of Benicia does hereby direct staff to take the following actions. 1, finalize the attached job description for an equity and diversity manager to coordinate city activities described in this report. Authorize the filling the equity and diversity manager position as temporary part-time FTE and proceed with the recruiting to fill the position. 2, join the Government Alliance on Race and Equity, GARE, and explore the National League of Cities Race, Equity, and Leadership REAL initiative, which we are now a part of. 3, mandate annual anti-bias training for city employees and elected and appointed officials, similar to the training requirements already in place for ethics and harassment prevention. 4, recognize June 19th as a city holiday with appropriate recognition and programming to share the history with the community and coordinated activities through the Benicia Public Library. 5, establish a Benicia Public Library program related to Black Lives Matter. The program will include a current and continuously updated inventory of books and other materials on the topic of racial equity and history of racism in America, along with relevant programming consistent with the mission of the library. The library is open to suggestions for forums, displays, and exhibits to further educate the community and provide a voice for marginalized members of the community. 6, commission a report on the equity indicators in Benicia, similar to the one prepared for the City of Oakland. According to Oakland's website, such a report can be used to develop a baseline quantitative framework that can be used by city staff and community members alike to better understand the impacts of race, measure inequities, and track changes in the disparities for different groups over time. This framework can then be used to guide and inform policies that address these disparities. 7, create a city council subcommittee and establish a relationship with the Benicia Black Lives Matter committee structured similar to the City and Benicia Unified School District Liaison Committee. Representatives would include 2 city council members, the city manager, the police chief, and any other relevant city staff. Benicia Black Lives Matter will designate its representatives. Agendas will be jointly determined, and an annual report will be made to City Council on the process. 8, evaluate ways to improve the city's civic engagement efforts and remove barriers to allow broader community inclusion in city business. More tools similar to Benicia Town Hall are needed. 9, explore ways to support business opportunities for Black residents. Seek opportunities for Benicia Black Lives Matter to work with the Chamber of Commerce and Benicia Industrial Park Association and other businesses, organizations, and consider holding city workshops to assist. Consider reevaluating the use of the commanding officer's quarters as a business incubator to support this effort. 10, create a web page with resources for those interested in learning about the city's actions related to Black Lives Matter with the appropriate resources provided. On motion of Councilmember Young, seconded by Councilmember Patterson, the above resolution was adopted by the City Council of the City of Benicia at a regular meeting of said council held on the 25th day of August 2020 by the following vote. Ayes, Council Members Campbell, Strawbridge, Young, and Mayor Patterson. Noes, Council Member Larvey-Spada. Absent, none. Abstain, none. Thank you.
My name is Mariano Sykes. I'll be reciting a poem me and my uncle wrote called A Formal Introduction to the White Supremacists. So, to all the racists, white supremacists, and bigots, let me formally introduce myself. My first name signifies the potential future of my manhood. My middle name represents the infinite capacity of my intelligence. My last name, well, let's just say it defines the flow of my existence. I am the result of the Chichen Itza, the tip of the San Felipe Nuevo. I am the beautiful, majestic phoenix that rose from the dark ashes. You really want to know me, don't you? Well, I'm the fragments of the freedom fights. Which one? You figured it out. I am the foundation of the Caribbean of San Juan. Some of the names you call me: mutt, mulatto, mixed breed, bastard, or charity case. I'm actually the caramel flavor from a black coffee with great tasting cream added. My smile demonstrates my power. My hug humbles the hate that destroys. Now don't get it twisted. Don't let these curls in my head fool you. There's some collard greens in my kitchen with hot water cornbread and spices not measured but dashed and taste tested.
Yeah.
My ancestors blew the smoke and danced the tribal rituals and sang the songs giving tribute to the Creator. Racist, you don't know me. So who am I? I am the image of the wrongfully and unjustly slain. I am hunted down and lynched like an animal while jogging, hung and ripened strange fruit. The picture on XL white t-shirts, the paint on red concrete, the place of many candles, teddy bears, and flowers. I am feared for my misplaced anger. I am misunderstood and biased by my teachers. I am slaughtered by the supposed community protectors and over-incarcerated by the crow reincarnated. I am the strong, powerful potential, mostly untapped. I am a leader who can save if you listen. I can be a contributor if you let me. I am a human being. I am fearfully made in the spitting image of my Creator. I am the co-author and reader of a living book already written. I am more than a conqueror. And yet, you don't even hear me. That 400-year multi-generational hate spirit is so ingrained in you that it's truly impossible for you to even know me. And with all that, I can't even hate you. To be honest, I feel sorry for you. So let me introduce myself. My name is Amariano Rashad Sykes, aka Shot.
Well, it's time for us to wrap up this amazing first part of Benicia's first Juneteenth festival. Can we get a amen or a wonderful, wonderful show. Before we go, we definitely want to again thank Ms. Roz and Miss Kashana. Oh, there she is. And everybody who worked on everybody you see with a red apron on, who helped put this Juneteenth festival together. And we want to thank the band, the wonderful jazz band, the Omegas, the Mega Gents. We also want to thank our vendors, Dr. Daniel Halyard, the NAACP, Vallejo Chapter, National Council of Negro Women, of course, again, the Mega Gents Youth Mentoring Program, Phil Graham, Tennis GVRD, Ethnic Notions, Fine Art and Gallery, Congressman Mike Thompson, its representative, and the amazing members of our school board who came out. We so love you. Thank you for supporting us because we are working with you and we love the collaboration. Thank you so much. So with that, Brandon, did you have any last words?
I just want to, on behalf of Benicia Black Lives Matter, again, thank everybody for coming. Thank all the comments. Thank the young man who shared his poem, who I think really grounded this in the way that I tried to. And again, if everybody can really just give like a very loud round of applause for all the folks from Benicia Black Lives Matter who worked so hard for this. And I alluded to this in my earlier comments, and I'll just reiterate it again. It takes organizing to move, organizing to make things happen, to make change happen, and more importantly, to make that change lasting and sustainable. So we hope that you all will join us as we continue to try to move Benicia and Solano County forward. Thank you so much.